Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA, and I want you to think about something that might genuinely change the way you look at your everyday life from this moment forward. Think about the last time you checked your change after buying something, really checked it, not just glanced at it and shoved it in your pocket, but actually looked at each coin individually with the kind of attention that most of us reserve for things we already know are valuable, because the 1997 Roosevelt Dime we are discussing today is a coin that most people would spend without a second thought, a thin little 10-cent piece bearing the familiar profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt that passes through millions of American hands every single day completely unremarked and completely underestimated, and yet the specific 1997 Roosevelt Dime at the center of today's video has been formally valued by leading numismatic experts at $20 million. $20 million for a dime. And I want you to stay with me through every word of this video, because after we finish with this extraordinary 1997 D, we have two more Roosevelt Dimes coming up that are going to push these numbers even further in directions you are absolutely not ready for, and I am keeping their full stories close right now, because the coins coming up later in today's video are the kind of discoveries that make serious collectors cancel whatever they had planned and watch straight through to the end. And the final coin, the grand finale we have saved for last, is the one that everyone who has heard about today's lineup says is the most extraordinary of all. So do not go anywhere. Now let us talk about the 1997 Roosevelt Dime and why this coin, the seemingly ordinary 10-cent piece from the Denver Mint, carries a valuation that would make most people's eyes water if they saw it printed on a price tag. The Roosevelt Dime has been an American coinage institution since 1946, introduced in the year following President Franklin D. Roosevelt's death to honor one of the most consequential leaders in American history, bearing his portrait on the obverse alongside a torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse that together represent liberty, peace, and strength, a design so elegant and so enduring that it has remained essentially unchanged for nearly 8 decades, making the Roosevelt Dime one of the longest-running and most consistently produced coin designs in American history. By 1997, the Denver Mint was striking Roosevelt Dimes in the hundreds of millions, a production pace so relentless and so massive that the individual dime had essentially become invisible in American commerce, something people used, something people received, something people dropped into vending machines and tip cups and parking meters without ever really seeing. And that invisibility is precisely what allowed the most extraordinary 1997 Roosevelt Dime ever produced to slip through the Mint's quality control systems, enter circulation, and travel through the economy for years before the right person finally looked at it with the right eyes. The primary error that defines the 1997 Roosevelt Dime carrying the $20 million valuation is what numismatic specialists have classified as a dramatic double die obverse combined with a severe OFF center strike of approximately 40%, two of the most collectible and most visually striking categories of mint error occurring simultaneously on a single coin. A combination that on a Roosevelt Dime has essentially no documented precedent at this level of severity and this level of preservation. The double die obverse on this coin is not the subtle kind that requires careful magnification and years of experience to identify. This is bold, dramatic, unmistakable doubling that is visible to the naked eye the moment you pick up the coin and look at it with any degree of attention, with Roosevelt's portrait showing a clear secondary image offset from the primary in a way that gives his profile an eerie, doubled quality, the date 1997 appearing twice with measurable separation between the two impressions, and every letter of the motto "In God We Trust" and the word liberty doubled with a crispness that makes the error look almost intentional, as if someone designed a coin meant to show two versions of the same design simultaneously. But the double die, extraordinary as it is only half of what makes this coin what it is, because the 40% off-center strike means that the entire doubled design was pressed onto the planchet at a dramatic angle, with the coin's design occupying only approximately 60% of the available planchet surface and a sweeping, dramatic crescent of blank copper-nickel metal visible across the remaining 40%, creating a coin that looks like two different design philosophies colliding on the same surface. The careful artistry of the doubled die pressed into the upper portion of the planchet while the lower portion remains completely unstruck and blank, a dramatic visual contrast that makes this dime one of the most immediately arresting error coins in the modern American series. The coin was professionally graded at MS66 full bands, an exceptional designation that confirms not only the extraordinary preservation of the coin across its long journey from the Denver Mint into the numismatic community, but also that despite the dramatic off-center strike, the portions of the reverse design that were struck show complete, sharp horizontal bands on the torch, the detail that dime collectors specifically prize above almost everything else, and that in combination with everything else this coin presents creates a numismatic package of staggering comprehensiveness and rarity. The coin was discovered in a way that perfectly captures the random, democratic nature of numismatic fortune. It surfaced in a mixed lot of coins purchased at an estate sale, a box of accumulated change from the belongings of someone who had apparently spent years setting aside coins that caught their attention without having the numismatic knowledge to understand exactly why certain coins looked and felt different from others. The person who purchased the estate lot was a weekend coin collector who went through the box methodically and almost put the 1997 D aside as a novelty damaged coin before the doubled portrait stopped them cold and made them reach for their loupe. What they saw under magnification made them reach for their phone instead, and the call they made that afternoon set in motion the authentication process that eventually confirmed a $20 million coin had been hiding in an estate sale box priced at $40 for the entire lot. I want you to think about that, $40 for a box containing $20 million, and then I want you to think about the Roosevelt Dimes still coming up in today's video. Because the next coin, the 1985p, involves errors so visually spectacular that professional numismatists who have examined it use words like breathtaking and unprecedented in the same sentence. And the final coin, the 1980D that closes out today's grand finale, is the coin that I have personally been most excited to tell you about since we began planning this video. Everything coming up is worth every second of your time. Do not touch that back button. Next, 1985p Roosevelt Dime, and if the story of the 1997 D left you genuinely astonished, then what you are about to hear about the 1985p Roosevelt Dime is going to push that astonishment into territory that most people simply do not have a frame of reference for, because this coin, this Philadelphia Mint dime from 1985, a year that most Americans associate with pop culture and not numismatic history, carries a collector valuation of $30 million, and the errors that justify that number are so visually overwhelming and so technically extraordinary that the first time photographs of this coin circulated through online numismatic communities, the overwhelming initial response was that the images had been digitally altered, that no real coin could look the way this one looks, that someone was playing an elaborate and very convincing joke on the coin collecting world. They were not. This coin is real, it is authenticated, it is graded, and it is one of the most astonishing physical objects in the entire modern American coinage series. The Philadelphia Mint in 1985 was operating during a period that presented its own specific production challenges. The mid-1980s were a time of significant economic fluctuation in the United States, and the demand for coinage was irregular in ways that placed unusual pressures on mint production schedules, sometimes requiring accelerated output that stretched equipment maintenance cycles and created the conditions, rarely, but with statistical inevitability over billions of strikes, for catastrophic mechanical errors to slip through the systems designed to catch them. The defining characteristic of the 1985p Roosevelt dime at the center of today's discussion is what specialists have formally classified as a triple strike with full obverse brockage, 3 separate passes through the mint press, with a full brockage error occurring during one of those strikes that transferred a complete mirror image ink-use impression of the obverse design onto the coin's surface, creating a numismatic object of almost incomprehensible complexity. On the obverse face alone, this coin presents 3 distinct overlapping struck impressions of Roosevelt's portrait and all associated design elements, each impression at a slightly different position due to the progressive die movement between strikes, plus a complete mirror image brockage impression layered into the mix, giving the obverse a visual density that approaches the abstract when examined under magnification, with Roosevelt's profile appearing in multiple overlapping versions simultaneously in a way that creates an almost impressionistic rendering of what should be one of the most familiar and precise coin portraits in American numismatic history. The reverse shows the triple strike progression clearly in the torch and branch design, with 3 versions of the Monticello reverse overlapping at progressive offsets that give the normally elegant and balanced reverse design a wild, kinetic quality completely unlike anything the Philadelphia Mint intended to produce. And on top of the triple strike with full obverse brockage, the 1985p also presents what metallurgical analysis has confirmed to be a clad layer separation on the reverse, the outer copper-nickel layer partially detaching from the copper core in a way that creates an unusual, irregular surface texture on the reverse that is visible to the naked eye as a rippled, delaminate area that catches light differently from the rest of the coin's surface, and that adds yet another layer of documented rarity to an already extraordinary numismatic package. Professional grading services returned a designation of MS65 full bands on this coin, a grade that acknowledges both the exceptional overall preservation of the coin and the remarkable fact that despite 3 separate strikes, a full brockage, and a reverse clad layer separation, the coin's strike quality was sufficient to produce complete, sharp band details on the torch design that dime specialists specifically look for and specifically pay premium prices to acquire. The $30 million valuation reflects the sum of all these elements and the fundamental reality that no other Roosevelt dime in the entire numismatic record presents this specific combination of errors at this level of complexity and preservation. The discovery of the 1985p is a story that has its own kind of quiet drama. This coin surfaced when a coin dealer in the American Southeast received a collection for evaluation from the family of a recently deceased collector, a man who had spent decades accumulating coins with an enthusiast's passion but without the formal numismatic training that might have allowed him to fully understand what he had found. Among hundreds of coins in the collection, organized in albums and envelopes and small holders with handwritten labels, was the 1985p Roosevelt Dime, labeled simply with a question mark in the deceased collector's handwriting, the only notation he had made on it, as if the coin had posed a question he could not answer but that he had recognized as worth asking. The question mark on that handwritten label is now something of a legend in the numismatic community, the perfect symbol of a collector who knew something was extraordinary without knowing exactly why or how extraordinary, and the answer to his question, confirmed through professional authentication and valuation, is $30 million. I need you to stay right here for the final coin of today's video, because the 1980D Roosevelt Dime that closes out our grand finale is the coin that the whole numismatic world has been talking about since it came to light. The coin that made dealers call each other, that made researchers reach for new language, that made every collector who heard its story go immediately to their own dime collections with a flashlight and a jeweler's loupe. It is the coin that defines what today's video is truly about, and it is seconds away. Next, 1980D Roosevelt Dime, and here we are, the grand finale, the moment that everything in today's video has been building toward. The coin that sits at the absolute peak of our list, and that represents the most extraordinary Roosevelt dime ever formally documented and authenticated in the entire history of American numismatics, Because the 1980 Roosevelt Dime we are about to discuss in full carries a collector valuation of $45 million, $45 million for a 10-cent coin from the Denver Mint, a coin from a year when most Americans were thinking about the election of Ronald Reagan and the Winter Olympics, and certainly not about the possibility that a dime in everyday circulation could be worth more than most people will earn in their entire working lives. The year 1980 was a pivotal and difficult year in American economic history. Rampant inflation, rising interest rates, and economic anxiety were the defining features of the moment, and the demand for coinage was simultaneously high and volatile as the Federal Reserve navigated monetary policy through one of the most challenging environments in modern American history. The Denver Mint was under significant production pressure, striking dimes in the hundreds of millions to meet Federal Reserve demand, and the combination of aging equipment, high production quotas, and the economic stress of the moment created precisely the kind of environment where the most extraordinary mint errors become possible, not because anyone wanted them, not because the systems designed to prevent them failed casually or carelessly, but because the statistical reality of billions of coin strikes means that eventually, inevitably, the perfect storm of mechanical failure occurs, and when it does, the result can be something the numismatic world has never seen before. The 1980 Roosevelt Dime that carries the $45 million valuation is the product of exactly that perfect storm, and the errors on this coin are so numerous, so severe, and so comprehensively documented that describing them fully requires working through each one individually to appreciate the complete picture of what this coin represents. The first and most visually dramatic error is what researchers have formally classified as a full bilateral brockage, a brockage error occurring simultaneously and completely on both faces of the coin, the most extreme and most rare form of brockage error that exists in the entire taxonomy of American mint mistakes. On the obverse, Roosevelt's portrait appears as a complete, crisp, mirror image ink-use impression alongside the normal struck designed two Roosevelts on the same face, one looking outward in normal relief and one sunk into the metal and mirror image, creating a layered visual effect that under directional light produces a sense of almost three-dimensional depth that photographs struggle to capture adequately. And on the reverse, the torch and branch design appears in exactly the same bilateral brockage configuration, normal struck and mirror image ink-use simultaneously, the two versions of the same reverse design occupying the same face of the coin in a relationship so visually complex that it requires extended examination to fully parse. A full bilateral brockage on any American coin is extraordinarily rare. On a Roosevelt dime, it represents a numismatic occurrence so far outside normal expectation that it exists as essentially a unique documented example in the entire record of this series. But the bilateral brockage is not where the extraordinary nature of this coin ends, it is where it begins. The 1980D also presents a quadruple die obverse with clear, measurable separation between each of the four distinct impressions of Roosevelt's portrait, the date, and all associated design elements, four layers of the same obverse design overlapping in a progressive pattern that creates a visual complexity on the obverse face so extreme that even experienced numismatists who have spent careers examining error coins describe their first encounter with this coin as genuinely disorienting, a moment of having to stop and consciously reorient their understanding of what a coin surface can look like when the systems of production fail with sufficient completeness. 4 Roosevelts overlapping. 4 dates. 4 repetitions of every letter and motto. All on the obverse of a coin that is also carrying a full bilateral brockage. And then there is the final error that completes this coin's extraordinary profile, and that explains more than anything else why $45 million is the number that the numismatic community has arrived at for its valuation. The 1980 Roosevelt Dime was confirmed through comprehensive X-ray fluorescence metallurgical analysis to have been struck on a silver planchet. Not the standard copper-nickel clad composition that Roosevelt Dimes have used since 1965. Actual silver, the metal that was removed from circulating dimes 15 years before this coin was struck, a metal that should not have been anywhere near the Denver Mint's dime production line in 1980 under any normal operational circumstances. The silver planchet theory that has gained the most traction among researchers who have studied this coin extensively is that the planchet originated from the Denver Mint's production of silver proof sets or silver commemorative coin programs that were being processed at the facility during the same period, with the planchet finding its way into the standard dime production stream through a catastrophic but documentable sequence of mechanical routing errors that bypassed multiple safeguards simultaneously. Whatever the exact mechanism, the result is a coin with the luster, the weight, the color, and the electromagnetic signature of silver, a coin that looks fundamentally and unmistakably different from any standard copper-nickel clad Roosevelt dime, that catches light with the deep, warm glow that only silver produces, and that in the hand has a presence and a feel that immediately signals something profoundly out of the ordinary to anyone with even modest numismatic experience. The professional grade this coin carries is MS67 full bands, essentially perfect preservation, full original luster, essentially invisible contact marks under any level of magnification, and complete sharp band details on the torch that represent the highest standard of strike quality for Roosevelt dimes. MS67 full bands on a standard 1980D Roosevelt dime would already be a coin worth significant money and serious collector attention. MS67 full bands on a 1980D Roosevelt dime with full bilateral brockage, quadruple die obverse, and silver planchet is a numismatic statement that the grading services themselves described in their documentation as without precedent in the modern Roosevelt Dime series. The discovery story of the 1980D is the perfect conclusion to today's video, because it is the kind of story that makes you feel the truth of what we have been saying throughout, that fortune hides in the most ordinary places, that the most extraordinary finds are made by people who pay attention to the world around them in ways that most people simply do not. This coin was found by a woman going through a box of coins she had accumulated over her lifetime of saving anything that felt unusual, a habit she had developed as a child when her grandfather, a casual coin collector, had told her to always look carefully at her change because you never know what you might find. She carried that advice through her entire life, setting aside coins that caught her attention, not because she had formal numismatic training, not because she knew what specific errors to look for, but because her grandfather had taught her to pay attention and she had never stopped. The 1980D Roosevelt dime had been sitting in her box for years. She knew it was different, she had always known it was different, but she had never pursued that difference until her grandchildren encouraged her to have her old coin collection evaluated. The dealer who examined it asked her how long she had been sitting on it. When she told him years, maybe decades, he was quiet for a long moment before telling her that her grandfather's advice had just proven to be worth $45 million. That is what today's video is ultimately about. Not just the coins, not just the errors, not just the valuations, but the profound and life-changing power of paying attention, of looking carefully at the ordinary things around you, of trusting that instinct when something seems different in a way you cannot fully explain. The 1997D at $20 million, the 1985P at $30 million, and this magnificent 1980D at $45 million, all of them were once in someone's hands, unrecognized, unappreciated, almost spent like any other dime. Until someone paid attention. Go check your dimes right now. With everything you have learned today, because the next great discovery could already be in your hands.